Where does this identity politics, this fixation on these niche cultural issues to the exclusion of actual real issues like inflation or wage growth or crime, where does this actually stem from? Why has this become such a phenomenon, particularly this century, the last 20 years?
The first thing that happens is that in the 70s, you have what's called the end of ideology, which basically means that all the classical ideologies that used to inspire people in the 20th century have gradually unraveled. Liberalism unravels, socialism unravels, communism unravels, conservatism kind of goes to sleep. And what you're left with is a political landscape that is denuded of the classical political ways of looking at things. I think it's at this point that identity and its politicization begins to gain momentum. The traditional issues that used to dominate the public sphere kind of gradually sort of decline, and instead what you have is an obsession and a focus on lifestyle. Everything from the environment and being green to being a vegan or vegetarian, everything gets politicized. And obviously what really gets politicized are things to do with your gender, your race, your ethnicity. And what makes this particularly interesting is that what underpins this politicization of lifestyle and of your identity is this notion that the personal is political and that the political is personal. So once politics becomes so privatized, so personalized, then you're not really that interested in tax cuts. You're really not that interested in the big social issues. You're not very interested in what kind of society you would like to create or build. You're not that interested in the future of your nation or your communities. Your horizons narrow. And what we've seen in the last 30 years, but particularly this century, is that identity becomes increasingly segmented and then segregated, so that people talk only to people like themselves. And not only that, but identity groups begin to fragment and new identities are created. So, for example, you had the movement for gays and lesbians gradually falling apart. You had groups of lesbians gradually arguing about, are you a cultural lesbian or are you a social lesbian? You have intersectionality coming in. You have a situation where in Britain, for example, where I live, a lot of trans people and a lot of lesbians are having a civil war, fighting each other. Amongst black people, you have this idea of colorism, that people who have light skin they are somehow almost as privileged as white people, and therefore there's a kind of estrangement kicking in. And this kind of continuous ghettoization of life becomes so deeply entrenched that after a while we lose sight of the fact that the bread and butter issues and the really key important issues must have a salience in our world. And that is because, particularly in America, but also in the Anglo-American world, the elites, the establishment in political sphere, business sphere, cultural sphere, no longer believe the kind of values that their ancestors or their grandparents believed in. They kind of lost faith and confidence in an American way of life or a British way of life. And because they lost that confidence, they become estranged and even hostile to the values that their parents and their grandparents grew up with. So American elites are arguably the wokest section of American society, even more woke than anybody else, similarly in Britain. And I think they bear the principal responsibility for the proliferation of these ideas.